семінарі, які ми проводимо, починаючи від перших місяців війни. Цей семінар носить назву цього місяця «Огляд економіки у вересні. Як застрахувати інвестиції від війни». Власне, тема страхування інвестицій, тема страхування військових ризиків є такою фокусною темою нашого семінару і нашого бріфу, який ми робимо щомісяця і розміщуємо на нашому веб-сайті, власне, цього місяця. І, як завжди, протягом останніх місяців ми робимо цю презентацію і це дослідження разом з German Economic Team, це проект, група, яку технічно виконує компанія Berlin Economics. І, як завжди, знов-таки медіапартнером наших цих щомісячних семінарів є інтернет-видання «Економічна правда». Дякуємо всім нашим партнерам за співпрацю. І, як завжди, у нас є синхронний переклад українською та англійською мовою. І, відповідно, як завжди, наша подія транслюється у Фейсбуці. Відповідно, якщо ви не зможете дослухати до кінця.
And thus, if you will not be able to listen till the end, or
as Ukrainian and English. І, власне, оригінальна...
And those basically the original version of it, the original recording is going to be available at Facebook, and you will be able to get back to our page and to recall what you have missed. So basically, we're going to start with according to our agenda, and we're going to have the introductory word with our partners from the German economic team, and we're going to have Gary Polushkin, who is the project manager of the GAT in Ukraine. Then we're going to have the overview of the Ukrainian economy for September, and then we're going to have a discussion on our focus topic, and I'm going to give you a better introduction to our main topic after we will have the first presentation. So Gary, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and warm welcome from Berlin to all participants of this webinar on today's presentation of the 6th issue of the monthly review of the Ukrainian economy during wartime, prepared by the Center for Economic Strategy. It's a great pleasure for me as project manager for Ukraine of the German economic team to introduce this webinar as part of the continuous strong cooperation of the Center for Economic Strategy and the German economic team. The German economic team is an economic policy advisory project financed by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and has been active for Ukraine for more than 15 years already. I'm very glad to see so many interested listeners and participants, because this webinar can bring in touch stakeholders from Ukraine and from abroad to analyze and improve the economic, financial, and social situation of Ukraine facing Russia's full-scale invasion. The format provides an important opportunity to discuss the state of the economy, which is a regular part of this event, as well as insurance schemes to attract private investment as a special topic. I'm very interested in learning more about the possibilities to use and to adjust such investment schemes for private investment, such that they would fit to Ukraine's challenges in the short run during the war, and in the medium and long term during the reconstruction process, because private investments are important to bring efficiency and productivity gains to Ukraine, but they are dependent on guarantees of a peaceful and stable political environment. I'm very delighted that the Center for Economic Strategy has invited such highly professional international experts who will present recommendations, implications, and an outlook on such investment schemes for Ukraine. I'm very looking forward to a fruitful discussion and giving back the floor to Maria and the Center for Economic Strategy, who hosts today's event. Thank you.
Дякую, Гарі.
Thank you, Gary. And right now we're going to present you with a review on the report on Ukrainian economy for September. It's not going to be presented by Marina, it's going to be presented by Dmytro Gorinov, the senior economist for the Center of Economical Strategy. He had been working with us as one of the key researchers on this project. And I wanted to outline that this report is going to be mostly based on the briefs, and unfortunately we are slightly delaying its print and its broadcast and its publishing, but tomorrow, as soon as you will get to your workplace, you will see it available at our website. It will be published. But right now, I pass the floor to Dmytro. Dmytro, please, the mic is yours, and we would like to see the September's Ukrainian economy report. And Dmytro, I think there is some kind of a problem with the sound, and we're going to send the whole technician team towards you. We're sorry, we have a technical problem with the sound.
А тепер? Окей, добре, дуже дякую.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank the technical team. So just a second. I'm going to open the presentation. I hope you can see it well. Great. So I think the time flies, you know, this half a year. I think that's even kind of a small jubileum for our reports. So basically, as we have already expected, we're going to start with the military updates. So as we have expected, we're going to have more and more weapons coming to Ukraine, and that's definitely going to help the Ukrainian military to work in the front line. And we know that it was really fast for us to once again free all of the Kharkiv region and to move also in the south. It was that fast and even slightly unexpected that it even pushed the Russian government into some certain additional steps. And you have heard that just recently they have announced that the partial mobilization of their forces, and they also have said about the organization of the fake referendums at the territory of Ukraine. But we know that this definitely, even if it's going to happen, that will be the formal case for Russia to treat it as their territory and to treat it as the attack for the Russian sovereignty. So we understand that it's really hard for us to say what would be the perspective of this kind of mobilization and what this kind of draft, but basically it's once again was the way for Russia to remind that they have both tactic and strategic nuclear weapons, and at this very moment that it just at least sounds as just basically an invitation, a very strange invitation to negotiations, but still we have to understand that there is nuclear weapons they're available, and let us hope it will not going to be used. The strategical weapons have been used only 70 years ago. Tactics, nuclear weapons have never been used before, so no one knows how to deal with that tactic nuclear war. So let us hope that it's going to be just the level of the blackmail. Otherwise, we know that Russians are really still at the positions where at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest power plant in Europe, and we know that this has been a power plant that for the very first time has been outlined from the grid, but we had this precedent. We were able to connect it back to the grid, and all of those actions by the Russians, they've been doing it even though the mission for the International Nuclear Energy Agency has been there. They have been there they have outlined that there are Russian forces in the power plant, and they've also outlined that the situation causes the atomic risks for Ukraine and for all of the countries all over the world. And there was the first strike closer to the South Ukrainian nuclear power plant. So we have to consider that as well. That might be the certain push to negotiations. But let us get back to the economy and the economic report and overview. According to the review that have been conducted by the business associations among the entrepreneurs, we have seen that there has been a stabilization on economical activities. We have seen that there is the part of enterprises that are working has been flexible. So right now we see that there's the fixed number, more or less, which means that everyone who's for whom it's possible to work physically, that they came back to work at least partially. The State Statistics Office has published the statistics of the downfall of the GDP for this quarter, and it's not that bad as the forecasts were. 37%, and the overall forecast for the year, we're not saying 40% of the downfall as the most pessimistic forecasts have been. Right now, we're saying that we're going to have a downfall for 33%, which is still a lot, but it's not that bad as we might have expected. So the most active sector right now, economy-wise, is agriculture, and we can see that things are going on more or less okay with that. We're now harvesting the yields, and they're only finalizing this process. For some enterprises and for some agricultural holdings, they even have the highest level of yield. So we have this agreement on the sea logistics and transportations. We have a lot of ships leaving Odessa's port with corn, with cereals, with wheat, with mostly corn, and they have now shipping the corn to different countries. And we know it's given some additional exporting money, and it's given us the opportunity to build up the money blanket for the new yields and for the next season. They're still working on some additional alternative logistics routes. We're building up the railways terminals at the borders. Ukraine has now procured all of the available spaces for temporary storage, and we even have this very interesting project between Poland and Ukraine. They have already agreed to build additional pipeline for the oil supply, so they will be able to actually pump the oil, the sunflower oil, to the different to Gdansk, to even port of Gdansk, just to use the Polish ports there. But then the main initiatives there was a hope before. Well, formally, we've had this agreement that would formally be held for 120 days, but it's not quite clear whether this agreement is going to be continued or is going to be broadened as well, because Russia has voiced out some certain thoughts that it basically has been an exchange. It's actually, they're saying that we're giving them the opportunity, they're giving us the opportunity to export our products, and the world gives the opportunity for Russia to export as well. So we've kind of used this agreement, but they believe that they didn't have the enough rights to sell their corn and their grains and then cereals. So they believe that the negotiation has been broken and the agreement has been broken. So we will have to take a look and see. Still, the exports right now is ongoing. It really helped us to hold on to the balance of payments in Ukraine, which actually given us the opportunity for the stabilization of economy. It's given us the opportunity to work better with the import and exports balance. So right now in July, we had minus 300 million. Right now we have the situation better, which actually given the opportunity for the National Bank to sell less currency and even to build up their procurement reserves. The budget, with the help of the import, it's given us the opportunity to fulfill the budget, and we know that it has been a downfall because there's a lot of money that is needed for the military actions. Right now we have, so the people's income is one of the main income and profiters of the budget. So it's given us the additional opportunities to update certain expenses that had been postponed or frozen before. And the additional external aid has been very helpful. And we've said about that in the previous presentation that before we didn't have enough level of the additional support. And in July, it has even been decreased. In August, it had been increased. So right now we're saying that it's 16.6 billion. So we know we had almost up to 20 billion a month. This partnering support and allies support is very good for us. So when the National Bank expects that 12 out of the 16.6 still expected billions should be received soon. So from what we understand that the situation where the budget is really prolonged, when we will have to add up to the budget from abroad, and the government has provided the forecast for the budget for the next year, and they have forecasted the growth of the economy, but there's going to be the great increases of the prices as well, and we're expecting to increase by 30%. So compared to the pre-war case, then the prices are going to grow almost by 70%. Based on that, we know that the budget income are going to be decreased, and knowing this really great expenses on having the military expenses in, the budget is going to be in deficit. And we're expecting that it's going to be mostly supported by the external support. And we're only speaking about the current expenses. And all of those other expenses, like, for example, the costs, direct and indirect costs of war, and there are some certain expectations and need for the restorations. And according to the different expectations, there has to be around 100 or 200 billion dollars. All of the things that are still not included there. So out of those money, we need around 100 billion dollars for the next years to restore, and we will need 17 billion till the end of the year and 3 more. So we do hope that our international partners are going to help to cover these holes in the budget. So that's all from my side. We'll still have faith with the military forces of Ukraine, and we'll hope that they will be fine. So thank you very much for your attention. Yes, thank you, Dima. And right now, if you will be so kind to close your presentation and to stop sharing, we are going to get to our brief panel discussion. And well, basically the topic for our monthly report and the topic of the presentation and the topic of our discussion this time is going to be the topic for the insurance of the military risks, the military risks insurance. So I'm going to give a little backstory of how we got to this topic. Well, basically the Center for Economy Strategy has been working with the issues of the military risks and political risks, starting from, well, we actually started to deal on this issue almost 1.5 years ago, when there was no still full-scale intervention from the Russian Federation. We have been working with the Ministry on reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. We have been working together on the strategy for the economical development of Lugansk and Donetsk region. And that's the very moment when Maria is not here today, Marina Ryabko, the deputy director of the center, in her discussions with the stakeholders, with the potential investors, with banks, with the loan givers and loan takers, she has underlined that a big problem for any kind of investment projects, and even throughout the everyday mundane things, for example, like buying a car, there's always a problem with insurance. So that is why we have started to discuss this topic as well. And in the recommendations that we were able to provide while we were working with the ministry right before the full-scale war has started, we have been working separately on the topic of the military and political risks insurance. We have been working together with the National Bank. We have been working on creating the needed amendments for the legislation based on the needs of the territories, where the risks have been evaluated as really high by the investors. We wanted to find the new opportunities to engage the private investments into that. then the war, the full-scale war has started, and Ukraine has got into a situation where the whole territory of Ukraine tends to be the territory with high military risks. And thus, as far as this issue has been very complex, and then we have been working even on the levels of regions, we have worked for a year with that. And right now, we're now getting even closer and deeper into researching this issue, and we've got to a certain significant result. There's more and more Ukrainian governmental institutions that are dealing with this question as well, because the problem is that we do not have one single state-owned institution that would be the Ministry of Insuring the Military Risks. So that is why throughout the whole period, the most important role was by Roman Karshuk, who has been at our event that we have conducted last week on the 30 years anniversary on Ukrainian membership in the International Financial Organization. He is the Deputy Executive Director of the World Bank into Ukraine and other number of other countries, and basically has been supporting the idea to create a special tool for insuring the military risks in Ukraine in Amiga, so the multilateral investment agency. This is basically the organization that is responsible for insuring the military risks in the framework of the World Bank. And right now, why have we decided to discuss this topic this month? Is because basically on the 16th of September, less than a week ago, we have seen a very positive press release by the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. In this press release, the ministry has informed that we have approved the mechanisms of ensuring the investments during the martial law, during the military actions, and we had agreed on having the pilot project on $30 billion that the agency already has, and it can be used as a pilot to work on the mechanisms of ensuring the military risks that are currently in Ukraine. And for the next year, it is seen that based on this trust fund that is going to be created by the World Bank for Ukraine, we're going to have up to 1 billion reserved, booked for the ensuring the military risks. And we know that without that, the private investment are not going to come to Ukraine. So basically, I've given you the overall informational background of how we've got to this topic as of now. And right now, I would like to introduce you with our distinguished experts. We know that all of the people on Center of Economical Strategy, we are not experts in this really narrow but very important issues as ensuring the military risks. So the experts that we're going to be talking today are Lesya Burbel, who is the head of the Department of the Methodology of Regulating the Insurance Market from the Department of the Methodology of Regulation of the Activities of Non-Banking Financial Establishment from the National Bank of Ukraine. And you know that the National Bank a couple of years ago has become responsible for regulating the insurance market as well. We welcome this decision because the National Bank has shown its really high capacities in supporting the stability of the financial institution in the banking market. And we have been really actively working with Lesya throughout the work that we have started while we were working on the strategies for the eastern regions of Ukraine. Another experts that we have worked with in the framework of this project, and the one that has been working with this topic, is Vadym Viun, who is the first deputy head of the Universal Insurance Brokers and Consultant Company. For multiple years, Vadym has been working in the insurance market of Ukraine. I don't even know how many years he has. And he has a great experience of ensuring the non-trivial risks, as it happens right now in our case when we're talking about the military risks insurance. And also we have Robert Kirchner, who is our partner in working on our monthly reports and overviews, and Dr. Hans Janos, who is who has collaborated with the German economic team while we were getting prepared for our monthly brief, and he helped us to prepare the chapter on the insuring of the military risks, and Robert is going to present us with what had been done in the framework of that work as well. But I think that it will be better if we will start with Lesya, because it's obvious that the National Bank, even though, the political leadership has now been delivered to the Ministry of Economy, which is logical in a way as well, because the Ministry of Economy is responsible, as the business said, for the KPI for in engaging investments. They are the first ones who are interested in getting new investment during the military time, but the National Bank has most of the knowledge among other state institutions. So Lesya, what do you think? Whether the mechanism of ensuring military risks is realistic and feasible, where is it the only possible tool for ensuring the military risks? And do you see there any kind of interest from the private markets to get into, for the private investors to get into this market, to start to relaunch the loans and investment in Ukraine while the risks are still high? Lesya, please, the floor is yours. Yes, hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this invitation. First of all, I would like to say that, of course, the issues of the military and political risks is a very controversial question, I would even say, and there's different options of how to work with the military risks, but there's not a lot of those options. And the options that might be used, and for example, might be used for Ukraine as well, the number of those options is quite limited. If we are speaking about the peculiarities of those risks, we wouldn't say that there are classical conventional risks that are usually being insured not only by Ukrainian insurance companies, but they're also complex and limited in their insurance capacities. They're not even being processed by the world and international insurance markets. Even though before the war, we've had the big companies and the big investors that used to have the interest on insuring the military risks that might have happened in the territory of Ukraine as well, providing the opportunities to cover those risks, they're still quite limited. The mechanism that is currently being discussed with MIGA as well, and we're only talking about the providing the interests of investors and supporting the interests of investors, the foreign investor, most of all, if they're going to be working on the territory of Ukraine, and providing them additional coverage in the military for the military risks on the territory of Ukraine. In our point of view, of course, it can mostly and in the best way can be conducted by the partners as MIGA is, because first of all, they are professional on those risks and in those situations. They also have the competence, the needed competence and the underwriting competence, I would say, when you can evaluate the risks in the right way, on its value, on its scale. So having these partners and having this opportunity to work with them are really of great importance for Ukraine and of great value. Speaking about from the position of the National Bank, in what way the National Bank can consider the broadening ideas of insuring this kind of risks in Ukraine. So we're trying to, first of all, be connected to any kind of processes that we see on the state level from this kind of insurance. And also we're trying to consider those options that would be available and possible for Ukrainian insurance providers as well. Even though Ukrainian insurance market is limited, we would like to engage Ukrainian insurance providers and their capacities for the collaboration with the international, insurances and insurance providers. We have been studying the international experience for the other countries as well, on how they have built the internal mechanisms of insuring the similar risks, maybe not military risks, but the terrorist risks, for example, because this kind of risks have been really relevant for a number of countries after the series of the terroristic attacks that we had since the very beginning of 2000s. The military risks and terrorist risks are not considered the classical risks that are really clear for all of the insurance providers. So basically, to some extent, these decisions have been clear for everyone. For example, creating the specific military insurance pools or creating the specific insurance funds that are going to be protecting and providing, guaranteeing the payments and transactions. I think that this mechanism can be considered for Ukraine as well. And we have had these negotiations already. We can see the good idea in that, and we would like to develop this concept further on. We would like to continue evaluating the opportunities of Ukraine that might really be used further on. The opportunities that Ukraine and Ukrainian insurance market have for covering the military risks. Of course, there are the questions about the price of the insurance, the additional participants and stakeholders, and the opportunities for the possible compensations for those losses. Because basically, those are the three words that I have mentioned all together, but each of these words has a lot of questions that have to be covered and a lot of questions that have to be answered. The issues of the financial support, the guarantee systems and the prices for the costs for the risks is very relevant. And we will not be able to resolve those issues without international partners. It's mostly connected to, first of all, the limited capacities of Ukrainian market, and overall it is connected to the really high price for these risks, especially understanding that right now in Ukraine we have a full-scale war going on in Ukraine, and we know that those risks are really highly possible. Then the question of the costs of the risks is very important. This is something that we would like to continue working on with the Ministry of Economy and with other international donors if they're going to be interested in working on this process. We also believe that it is also the future for the Ukrainian insurance providers, not only for the international investors when we're only speaking about insuring their risks. So this will be the very brief word an introductory moment for me, so thank you very much for that. Yes, thank you very much, Lesya. That was clear from your side. We now know that Ukrainian participants of the market, they're really interested in earning, especially because of the economical situations. But of course, we have some certain limitations that we have. And on the other hand, we also have the international institutions like MIGA is the one that has experience in that. Vadym has analyzed that and those options for eastern regions of Ukraine even before. So Vadym, what would be your evaluation of the situation right now? Based on the idea that what you have seen before, based on the experience that you've had throughout the full-scale invasion and full-scale war you had right now with the companies that you're working. So please, Vadym, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Well, first of all, it's really hard for me to add up something additional moments after Lesya has spoken, because she has given you a very professional outline for this type of insurance in the world overall, because basically this is a type of insurance where a very limited approach for the mathematical statistics can be used. So those events that you can try to insurance yourself for, those events, they have very subjective character, if we can say it like this, subjective nature, which is even connected to the peculiarities of the personality of certain people. So that is why it's really hard to be calculated and assumed with traditional mathematical methods. So it's really hard to evaluate and assume the price. So those actors of the market who have decided to provide these services, they have to create the support for their own systems. And that creates additional transaction costs for this type of insurance, which also makes it harder. I fully support to what Lesya has said. that even throughout the more peaceful time, when, let us say, the aggression of the Russian Federation was limited, I haven't seen any other opportunities of creating this market segment in Ukraine without involving the powerful international organization. First of all, we're talking about the MIGA, the Multilateral Agency on Guaranteeing the Investment, which is one of the institutions for the National Bank. And Philippe, I wanted to ask you whether Roman Kachur is here with us, because I have a couple of questions for him. No, unfortunately, Roman wasn't able to join us before. Yes, he's done a lot in this process, but unfortunately, we can't have him today. But if we will need some clarifications from his side, we will be able to do that, and we will add up to those public documents that we're also publishing. Yes, that's a pity. That's a pity, because on the event of the 13th of September, the event that you have held, when we were talking about the Ukrainian collaboration with the international organization, financial organizations, he mentioned that, but we couldn't get clear understanding from his presentation of what was the result of his negotiations with the management of the National Bank, because he said there's going to be some certain specific tool for Ukraine that is going to be there's going to be really new for MIGA, not the one that they typically work with. So the question is still, like, what would be the response from the private market for that? So on one hand, we can hope that if everything's going to be positive and good, and if this pilot project with this $30 million will be fully and successfully implemented, and then this volume of this fund, well, I hope that if we're talking about the tools, then we're talking about the trust fund, the coverage trust fund for covering the political and military risks in Ukraine. We do hope that it will have more money and more capacities in it later on. But to say right now what kind of effect it's going to have, whether it is have the multiplying effect for the private markets, and whether we will be able on this basis to engage more volume or engage more capacities for the market. For example, we'll be able to engage the London market. We don't have enough information yet. And getting back to your questions, what is the situation with the market and what the market thinks right now? Maybe some people will disagree with me, but if we will just say it straight, then I would like to say that we never had this market in Ukraine before. Yes, we've had some separate agreements, we've had some separate coverage that has been provided for the physical loss or the destroying of the assets. Sometimes we've had some of the coverage of the losses due to the interruption of the production lines, but Ukrainian insurance providers, they were only the fronters. So basically 99% of the coverage has been then reinsured in London. And this is what Lesya has mentioned as well. So as of now, if we are talking about our local insurance providers, we don't have the experience of underwriting this risks, because once again, this is still about for the reinsuring market. We don't have the financial capacities in the local market to provide the coverage for those risks, so you will not be able to keep up with these risks on your own. And I would say, as of now, there is a big need for the coordination of all of the parts, all of the stakeholders engaged. Maybe with the support of the National Bank, we need to create some certain platforms to establish this communication that will give us the opportunity to understand, first of all, of what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about the collaboration with the World Bank, and how we can use it all together to create this additional multiplier. So how we can add some additional capacities for the private market and volumes for the private market. There is an important aspect as well. You might recall that as well. We are talking about the project of the economical transformation of Donbass and the Donbass region, the one that you recalled as well. So when we've started the technical consultations with MIGA autumn last year, there was an important aspect, the opportunity to have the MIGA guarantees for Ukrainian investors as well. And this has turned to be the very important and hard political question for the World Bank, because it was a precedent that should have been created first time in history. That will be the question that I wanted to have to Roman culture, because basically at this very stage, are we talking about the political opportunity to discuss this question further on? Because that will also mean a lot for a lot of other things to happen. If we're going to have this done due to the general interest towards Ukraine and due to the overall support from the international community, that would create unique opportunities for the development of this segment in Ukraine. So like, for example, we're not going to be, for example, sending the money to London as the insurance premiums to London or Washington, for example. We will be able to use this opportunity to create the needed competences here. But once again, I really would like to have this question to Roman, so I'll be really, really grateful if you will give me the opportunity and it will help me out with this. Yes, of course. Thank you very much for your input, because yes, that's for sure is an important question. Under the war conditions, we have already seen that, we had multiple questions that have been lost in communication between the two decision-making centers. And it's not about the government being bad, but because it is a new question that hasn't been considered before by the system. So basically, we need a very good project manager to be able to cope with that. And for sure, we need to have a Ukrainian representatives to the World Bank, for the National Bank of Ukraine, and the government overall, because it also builds up on the Prime Minister as the head of the government for these decisions and for this question to be resolved. And it's not the only sole question that has to be resolved. We have a lot of issues that we're now dealing with during the war. Okay, but we have gone through the very technical moments straight away. Before I pass the floor to Robert, can you still please, Vadym, as they say on the television, can you explain for the average users and average citizens, because for sure not all of the people are familiar with the importance of these topics. So on one hand, I have a Google advertisement from one of the insurance companies. They say they have the service. We're going to provide you the insurance for the military risks, from what I can understand, on the retail market. And I do understand that on the retail market is something different, but what it is that they're offering in this case, and who's going to be covered by that, and what kind of questions they're covering, because we do understand that we have Ukrainian businesses where their warehouse is being destroyed and they need $80,000 to restore that, and we quite understand that it wouldn't be possible to do without the specific tools. But what is this client's journey, customer's journey, for people who have something small that you would like to insurance from the military risks as well? And what would be the dead end of the client's journey if we're speaking about the big projects and the big insuring volumes? Well, you're right, you are. Well, I would say that some of the insurance providers and companies, they're right now offering some insurance products, and they're quite freely using and interpreting what military risks are. But this is very relevant even during the peaceful time, the times of peace. You have to read of what is written, written in the agreement. The devil is in the details. So basically, I cannot say, I haven't read these conditions on the insuring of these retail products, but I can presume that the big Ukrainian companies, they can provide a certain level of coverage, for a couple thousand hryvnias for sure, for cars, for example, or for the private households. But as far as we're now talking about the full-scale restoration of our country after the war, we're talking about the amount of money for a couple $billion. So we can't even discuss Ukrainian market as an independent actor in this issue, unfortunately. Of course, we can build up it on the personal contacts. And you can find it, for example, from London, or some coverage for some specific transactions or operations, for example, for the agricultural exports. Having these amicable relations, we can get those products on a friendly basis, but it will not be a systematic decision. It will not be the insurance and insuring of some certain investment assets. So something that is currently is relevant, for example, the transportation of grains and cereals. Well, you can get something in this sector, but getting back to the topic of the World Bank and MIGA. So if the MIGA and the trust fund from the World Bank is going to be launched, it will be a very important positive signal for the private markets. And under certain conditions, it might be a good flag that you can take and grab, and you can start to work with the private market as well. And we're talking about the dozens or hundreds of millions of dollars from the private market there. But it also requires a well-coordinated work from us, so that the state institutions that are currently engaged in this work, of course, they have some political weight and they have the political access to the politicians in the international, in other countries, but they need to keep in mind the ideas of other people, that are going to continue with the agreements that are going to be building up the words and structuring all of the operations. Well, yes, this is the topic that really bothers me, because the difference between the press release by the Ministry of Economy and the very specific agreement for insuring the specific asset is going to be tremendous. Yes, for sure, I can get back to the project that we have been developing for years, and what Lesya has mentioned and referenced to as well. If you can recall, then what we have got to in the end, that we need to make some amendments in the legislation, because the National Bank then has said they have published their very professional comments to our first tryout, because they said that we need to mention that in the law. We need to have the notion of the political risks, because we don't have one single definition in the world. For example, the federal government of Germany, they have their own definition. MIGA has its own definition like this, and the London market has been interpreting it according to their traditions. So the projects that we've had, and that's why we have stopped these projects in February, because we have been working with the commands of the National Bank, but we didn't have the opportunity, unfortunately, to have the second iteration then. So the scale of work that is needed to be done is still going to be tremendous, even under the circumstances if we will have the full support from the World Bank as well. We are at the very beginning of a long road that we have to take. Thank you, Vadym. So right now I would like to pass the floor to Robert, and then and my colleagues are going to telling me that there we have comments among our participants, and there is the external guests that would like to comment some of the options as well. But before that,
what is your view on the perspective of military risk insurance for Ukraine? What is your vision?
Yes, thank you very much, Gleb, and also welcome from my side. Good afternoon. I would like to share with you some thoughts which are probably more on a strategic level. So as you said, I'm probably going one step back and put the discussion more on a conceptual or strategic level. We have contributed to the monthly with our colleague Hans Janus on this short overview of the issues. Hans is himself a practitioner. He was the head of the German ECA and also dealing with investment guarantees. And he was also president of the Bern Union of global ECA. So he's a very knowledgeable person on this, and we work together on this topic. So my first point would be that the role of the private sector in Ukraine's recovery cannot be underestimated. So as you know, almost 80% of gross value added is created in the private sector, more than 2/3 of employment. The private sector is responsible for more than 2/3 of investment. So we cannot really talk recovery without looking at the private sector, right? Now, regarding private investments, obviously there are a few factors, as always, to consider. One is the rule of law issue, which is not our topic here, but obviously is probably the most dominating or most important factor. but there are, I hope, promising signs that things will improve on that front. There is now the EU accession vector, which was for many, many accession countries really a big boost for investment also, because it gives you a long-term anchor. And then the third issue, and this is what we're discussing here, is the security situation, the military risk. And unfortunately, both during wartime, but probably also beyond the actual hostilities, we will face a situation where these risks are very, very high and deter or impede investments by private investors, both domestic but also foreign. I think that's the first part. Now, how can these risks, these higher risks, be insured? And it was already said, the private market in terms of war insurance is actually not really working. There are a few exceptions in marine and aviation industries where you can extra insure certain risks, but overall, for what we have in mind, the private market is not working, right? Because these risks cannot be insured. And that is the first, I think, conclusion, that we have a market failure here. The market failure calls for public intervention. Now, there are public sources of investment guarantees, of political risk insurance. MIGA was already mentioned. And we have also bilateral in companies or institutions. In Germany, it was also mentioned, Germany is giving investment guarantees to outward FDI. So here we're talking about foreign direct investment only, right? Which can be insured. Now the question in Ukraine obviously is that we also need to insure domestic investment. So we need actually a much broader scope, which calls for different instruments. So I would argue that the existing instruments, whether they are bilateral or multilateral, they are in need of modernization, definitely the bilateral ones, but we need to move beyond that. We need new instruments. We need to think outside the box. And this is basically, I think, where here the MIGA proposal is a good starting point, which I think needs to be elaborated on over the next couple of months, because there are many, many questions, many, many issues. And right now, I think our job should be to collect these issues and to try to put them together in a structured manner, right? Just to give you some examples, domestic versus foreign investment. I mentioned that already. That needs to be defined. Then the question, do we insure during the wartime? Do we insure after the wartime? It will be a different security context, right? What is the exact division of labor between the private sector and the public sector? So we will have a kind of PPP. And all these things, the mechanisms, the coordination, and so on, all these things need to be decided, because, as I said, it's a new product. It's something I think that has never been done before in that form, and we need to have a clear answer to all these questions. The charm, I think, is, and here I'm also reflecting a bit on the international discussions, the big charm of this idea is obviously that for the donors, this is an instrument which might be cheaper than sending grants and loans to Ukraine directly to support the country, right? Because in a positive situation, such guarantees, partial guarantees, maybe they will not be called. So it's from a fiscal point of view also much more convenient for the donor countries. And I think that's also why there is much interest from the donor side in terms of supporting such ideas. But again, we are pretty much in the early stages right now. I think it's more about asking the right questions and developing a concept further, for which there is no blueprint, unfortunately. But I think everyone knows about the importance of the topic, and so I'm quite confident that we will see some real movement going ahead.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much for also getting us to a strategical level for the further discussion, because of course, except for this mechanism that we have discussed in our previous presentation, when we have discussed it, but from what I have heard from the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, we've also had this idea of bilateral agreements, for example, with the governments of the allies of Ukraine, for example, for providing the insurance for the big investing projects, for supporting them from the specific countries for their constructions and investment on the territory of Ukraine. That's one of the options that is being now discussed. The insurance providing the insurance from every specific country. So basically, what Robert has said, engaging the state, engaging the public sector when the private sector cannot work on this situation alone. Okay, my colleagues have told me that we've also have some comments from one of the participants of discussion. So I would like to invite Vyacheslav Chernyakhovsky to participate in our panel. So I think that Vyacheslav is already here in the panel. So Vyacheslav, please, you can also participate here, but please introduce yourself in the right way. From what I know, Vyacheslav is the expert for the insurance market. But if you would like to introduce yourself in the right way, so what it is that you can add up to the discussion? Yes, unfortunately, I can't turn the video on somehow. We can only hear the sound. Okay. Yes, we can hear the sound well. That everything's okay with the sound? Yes, you can see the sound, and I think that you can see the video already. So, dear colleagues, thank you very much for your invitation as well. Good afternoon. I would like to give a little bit of a detailed comment, I guess, because I have a lot of information on this case. And there are a couple of moments, couple of important moments that I would like to highlight. First of all, for quite a long time, we have already been collaborating in the group on restoring of Ukraine on the issue of the restoring the military risks, and we had a home task that we needed to do for this group. We had a home task to find to get these issues about the insurance and the insurance market. So there's a lot of information available there right now. So I would like to give you a couple of the main comments there. There are a couple of issues that I wanted to outline. First of all, I do not have any joy towards the claims of the Ministry of Economy. Well, first of all, we understand that MIGA has a very limited resources on the coverage. So right now, when we say 1 billion, that's quite a lot for MIGA, because the guarantees that they have been providing, they're providing for 1.5 billion for more than 100 member countries. And we know, and there's a lot of developing countries there. So we have to understand that this 1 billion is basically close to nothing. We have already recalled those figures today that we need 70 or 100 billion for the restoration of the Ukrainian market just for the first year. So the assets that are going to be built, they have to be insured for the next year, and that's 100 billion again, and there are additional 100 billion for the next years. So we have to understand all of those risks as well. This 1 billion from MIGA is just a drop in the sea that will not resolve any of the problems. Ukrainian government has offered some certain guarantees, and Robert has recalled the guarantees that can be provided by the state. These guarantees have been evaluated in overall amount of 100 million euros that Ukrainian government can provide. That's quite a lot of money for Ukrainian government, but that's not a lot. That's not enough with all of the responsibilities and all of the expenses that we need to carry. So I think that we have to step from the other side for resolving this issue. MIGA can provide the guarantees for the private investments. And we do understand from our side that a lot of money is going to be provided from the structure of the World Bank, from international governments, from the other countries. And it's also going to be the money from going to be the money from those money that has been frozen, that has been postponed, the money that has been owned by the Russian Federation and that has been owned by the Russian companies. So those money, they're going to be the money that are not going to be owned privately. This money is not going to be insured by that. And they might not be supported by the insurance protection, by the insurance. We're now saying 100 billions. Is it a lot or no? This is basically like the payments of the market for the natural disasters last year. So I'm only speaking about the losses that have been covered. We have infrastructural projects. We have the projects on the restoring of the construction that are going to be covered by the state institutions, international organizations, and intergovernmental organizations. All of this investment, and maybe that's not even investment, all of those charitable money, all of that has to be insured. Because basically we've had one of the questions today that about the definitions of what the military risks are and what is being covered and what is not. And I think that we have already started to do that with our international partners, but we need to have some really clear requirements that are going to be interpreted in the same way, because again, the military and the war risks have different combinations. The insurance for the political risks, there are some political risks that are not connected to military risks and war risks, the questions of the nationalizations, the questions about the prohibition of the prohibition of the capital provision. So for example, this limitations on the national bank for transferring money for the reinsurance abroad, especially in the infrastructural projects. Also, the money that can cover the military risks, and this prohibition is a direct risk for MEGA because this is the political risks that has been approved due to the actions by the state institutions. And right now, for those, and Hilip has seen that as well, he has seen some certain offers about how the insurance companies, how they're offering the insuring of the military risks right now in Ukraine. In our association, 7 companies have already been providing this type of insurance. 5 have been developing this insurance products. We're not talking about a lot of money. They were only speaking about 3 or 4 up to 5 million hryvnias, but they're covering, for example, the expenses and risks for the cargo transportations, for the cargo transportations. There are small enterprises that can be included into this insuring program. And of course, we're only working on the territories that are not 70 kilometers away from the front line. So there's also the questions of the evaluations of the risks, the questions of the definitions being used, but it works already. What we do not have now, we do not have the opportunity now to be the participants of the world reinsuring market, because all of this 500,000 tons of grains and cereals that have been delivered, that have been insurance. So right now we have a lot of scale of transportation of the cereals by sea and by railroad, and it's all been insurance not by Ukrainian companies. It's all becomes really expensive. It's all even more expensive for all of the companies who are shipping it to either the intermediaries or the final customers, because all of these companies, they don't have their partners in Ukraine that in case of the insurance case, they can evaluate it here with their experts, understanding the legal administrative aspects of the country, everything that is needed to have the full documental coverage of the case. They're having additional expenses calculated there as well, so that in case of the insurance case, they might finance additional experts, additional companies that will come here to Ukraine and are going to conduct a certain evaluation work. So I do believe that, first of all, and we are already lagging behind, I do believe that Ukrainian market should be engaged together with the international markets, because all of those cargoes, there have been insurance. Right now, the tariffs for processing one cargo like that is around 3% per one shipping. 3% of the cost. This is 150% higher than it was before. So we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about the high risks. But if it would have been done by Ukrainian companies together with their international partners, the very ones that are insuring right now Ukrainian risks, we could have done it much faster and cheaper. And we would have some additional money for the budget. It would have been additional jobs and additional taxes for Ukraine. So that is very, very important. I do believe that the National Bank right now is in some way slowing this process down and not giving the opportunity for the Ukrainian insuring companies to buy currencies. You are increasing our risks. We do understand that Ukrainian companies, after the rate are being raised, they will not be able to service the transactions that haven't been delivered to the international partners. They have losses of more than 500 million hryvnias, which is almost 100 million hryvnias for budget. And this payments are being postponed for a longer period of time, and we're only increasing those debts. So some of the reinsurers are not going to be continuing to work with Ukraine. They have already closed their deals with Ukrainian companies. Right now, we are resigning the agreements for the next year. And if in a month we will not have these issues resolved, then all of the negotiations in the market are going to be started with the question when Ukraine is going to pay the debts for the previous periods. The amount of money that is needed there is around $5 million per month. And this money, it's not even, it's not even pennies in overall scale. It's basically even less than 100th share of a penny compared to the possible outcomes. So I think that is one of the first tasks that Ukrainian National Bank has to do, to stop slowing down the whole work. We are now failing the programs in collaborating with international companies. We're failing the program of the government because international companies don't want to take additional responsibilities and to start some kind of work when they don't have the guarantees from Ukraine as well. And like I do see that Robert also supporting that. Yes, we can do the combined bilateral programs with the participation of the government, with the participation of the other institutions for the certain amount of money that will make the insurance cheaper. That will help us to engage the investors, the private investors if they will be there, or to engage them into the projects that will be insured by the government as well. Yes, thank you, Vyacheslav. We need to follow our time schedule because yes, I do understand that I've caught your main message. So we have to engage the participation of the private sector, and yes, and we have the capacities to do that in the international market. I really wanted to give one example just to make it clear for everyone. For example, as of now, there has been, just a minute. Yes, just a minute. So we have to provide right now, for example, like we do understand that there is a lot of property that has to be restored. We need the construction materials, windows, doors, and all of the other stuff. For the second month already, we cannot reinsurance the construction of the plant for the glass for the windows because the investors are ready to have this money. The companies are ready to also reinsure it, but we don't have the approval of that. And this is an important number, around $100 million. We already have those payments as either the payments or already the insurance cases are being processed on those assets that have been insured against the military risks. More than $100 million have already been paid to Ukrainian companies by the reinsurance providers. So we have the experience, we have the knowledge, we have the skills of how to do that. So I do believe that we need to raise this system and we need to help the state and help the international institutions in insuring this kind of risks, reinsuring these risks and considering the other insurance cases. We understand that with all those capacities, everyone believes that the bomb is going to follow, the shell is going to get you. We already have, talking about the secondary risks, for example, the unblown mines, the one that were left in the debris, the one that are the fields that are still mined and that need to be demined. We already have the cases on the tractors or combines that have already been blown by the mines. Those are the real cases, and it all needs to be insured. Yes, thank you. Yes, because if we want to listen to the position of the National Bank on those issues as well, that would be very good. And I understand that the question of the currency regulation is not in the mandate, not in Lesya's responsibility, but still we understand that there is a vertical that is responsible for that, that is more or less connected to Sergei Nikolaichuk, who is the deputy head of board, and about these policies as well. But here I would like to ask Lesya not only to focus her interest on the reinsurance issue, but can you give us your own understanding of what our colleagues have said as well? So if you have any comments, that we're going to take that, and we're going to close our discussion soon. Yes, thank you very much. And when I've started the first part of my presentation, I've mentioned that what it is that we see that Ukrainian insurance providers, they can be engaged, they can be added to the insurance of these risks. So when I've said that, I've meant those insurance cases, the one that Vyacheslav has mentioned as well, the so-called secondary military risks and secondary war risks, and those risks that are going to be relevant to the Ukrainian insurance businesses in the post-war period. It's possible for those risks to be covered by Ukrainian insurance providers. They are not that significant, and considering the territory where we had the military action and the territory of Ukraine where the Russian army didn't reach, mostly there's not going to be covered by these risks. This geographical division of the risks will give the opportunity for the insurance providers to cover those risks effectively. The organizational amount of this kind of products and insurance provision can be made with the PPP, the one that we have spoken about as well, and we can organize this with the support of the National Bank. And we can do that either through the very specific pools that will be created with the participation of Ukrainian insuring companies. And we're going to be adding up, for example, and reassigning these risks to the international insurance companies and reinsurance companies, that if they have the capacities to cover that, and to engage the state to this amount and to that extent that is going to be needed. So right now the risks are higher than the classical market of Ukrainian insurance companies can provide. And we're also talking about the covering the investors' risks for the restoration or the reconstruction of the assets that have been destroyed or damaged in Ukraine. Speaking on the reinsurance procedure, and so the idea that right now we have certain limitations for the transactions, unlimited transactions of the currency. It has been caused by the number of things, and the National Bank has commented upon that for multiple times. But I'm going to voice it out again. This is due to the situation on the currency market that is right now, and the need for the control of the currencies that have been and are transferred by the importers. Speaking about the reinsuring transactions, they are not allowed to everyone in all of the cases. There are certain permissions that have been provided to the certain levels, to the certain types of insurance. Like, for example, it is not possible to provide the insurance without the reinsurance guarantee. And there's also some numbers of permissions that give you the opportunity to once again to complete the currency transaction in a different type. Of course, it is a different procedure than we've all got used to when, for example, the market participants were able to do that with no limitations there. But if we're talking about the separate product, if we're getting back to the separate product topics, when it's going to be completed, when we're going to understand that the participation of the National Bank, that the participation of the Ministry of Economy or other stakeholders is clear and defined, then this kind of decisions on the level of every state institutions will be taken. So we cannot speak about that right now, so that the temporary restrictions on the completing the transactions for the reinsurance agreements is going to impact the work on the product that is currently interesting for us when we're talking about the insuring the military and the war risks. So we have to find the differences between all of those products, and we have to understand what are the tasks that we have to cover today. What are the tasks for the short-term perspective, the mid-term perspective, and long-term perspective? And we need to find the difference of the insurance in the house on fire, because insurance in the risks of war and military risks in Ukraine needs specific guarantees, and and insurance in it in after war period is going to be a completely different mechanism and completely different tools that we might use for both cases. Both cases that there are different tools that the private sector and the state can offer. So yes, I would agree to what all of the participants said today. We're only at the very beginning of this way. We need to work on this product. We need to complete it. We need to have a good established communication between the state institution and engage the Ukrainian insurance market and to engage the international community. As of international experts, insurance company, the World Bank, USAID experts, everyone who's ready to join. Only together we will be able to find the best products for the insurance providers, for both for the small ones who, like, for example, would like to insurance, for example, the agricultural machinery, or who would like to insurance their life or their transportation means. So that might be the sector, even those might be the sectors that will be interested in the insurance provision. And we'll also can find the good offers for the big investors and the commercial institutions that are planning to invest their money in the restoration of Ukraine. Yes, thank you, Lesya. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would say that we had a very narrow, but still very important topic. I think that, throughout the war, we have already seen that insurance is not some kind of a really narrow, unclear segment of our economy. The only segment that we're facing in even only in our everyday life, and even before the invasion has started, the Western companies, they have started to fly to Ukraine. We have already seen how important the insurance was. Then we've seen the very same importance of insurance when we were trying to find the resolution for the cereals issues and the shipping questions. So right now we're discussing these issues on the ideas of restoring the economy and the business development overall. We will keep in touch with this topic in the Center for Economy Strategies, as we've been doing it throughout the years. So once again, I wanted to remind you that the full report and with the ideas on the insurance of the political and military risks to get prepared by our colleagues from GET and Dr. Hans Janus is going to be published tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. We will see you in a month with the Ukrainian economy review for October 2023 and with a new interesting topic for discussion. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Have a calm day, calm week, calm months, and see you soon. Thank you very much to all of our participants and our audience. Thank you, and goodbye. All the best.